Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with our journey, our discussion of the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2021. And that brings us to the Criterion Collection release, which has been designated by Criterion at spine number 1069. And this is a film from 1974. The filmmaker is Jacques Rivette. And the name of the film is in French, and please pardon me for my poor pronunciation. The name of the film is Céline et Julie vont en bateau, Phantom Ladies Over Paris, or in English, Céline and Julie Go Boating. From Jacques Rivette, directed by Jacques Rivette, and it is from 1974. It stars Juliette Berthaud and Dominique Labourière and Bulle Augier, Marie-France Bizier, Barbette Schroeder, and others. And the story or screenplay is actually credited to Juliette Berthaud, Dominique Labourière, Bulle Augier, Marie-France Bizier, and Jacques Rivette, and the dialogue is credited to Eduardo de Gregorio. This is the film which, according to its credits, its opening credits, it's called, or the title is, in French, Céline et Julie vont en bateau, Phantom Ladies Over Paris. And it is often referred to in English as Céline and Julie Go Boating. The plot or story, the structure of the film is very complex and very multi-leveled, and it is a very playful one at that. And so it's a brilliant construction. And if we were to look at it and perhaps try to distill the essential, plot or story, what its essence is, perhaps one can focus on the aspect of the film that is Céline and Julie, namely the film being about how they met, essentially, how they interact with each other, what their relationship is like, how they carry on with each other, the stories that they bring to the table when they are interacting with each other, and in fact with us, the viewer, and stories about themselves. And it's not just that too, it's about how one interacts with the story of another. And so this type of play acting, this type of childlike reverie, this type of feeling a sense of freedom, and also feeling the importance or playful, witty nature of storytelling and inquisitiveness, and all set, as I say, within this component of the film, that is the relationship between Céline and Julie, set in the context of meeting in this particular time and place, which I understand is 1970s Paris, and it's specifically in summertime during the year. And so in that way, this is a summer movie which is about these two people and their inquisitive nature with each other, and also with the outside world, the externalities of the outside world, and how it's represented in the film in various modes, and I'll get to that momentarily. So that's one aspect of their relationship. Also, the sense of storytelling, the playful nature of storytelling, what is truth, what is artifice, what is theater and fiction, and how that is further developed, and how these characters, and thus how we interact with this very evolving dynamic of the nature of theater and the nature of art and fiction and literature, and what does it mean to take these elements and maybe interact with them and use them and play with them. And this is the playful and really energetic playground, if you will, that is being set. The stage is set as well by Jacques Rivette and company in this very dynamic, bold, and fun, and as I say, joyful and ebullient film. That is Céline et Julie vont en bateau, Phantom Ladies over Paris, or in English, Céline and Julie go boating. But that is, I think, that is one way of looking at it. And this film is open to many interpretations, possibly, and also many perspectives. And another one of those perspectives, perhaps, is by looking at the structure of the film itself, because we are also privy to different storylines, different story arcs, and this is where the film becomes very much like almost a labyrinthine type of puzzle box, in my view, because the film also shifts perspectives, shifts story arcs, even between our main characters, Céline and Julie. So perhaps there is a type of intersection as to how one character can be involved in the story of another, and the idea of switching roles and reversals. This is very linked to, say, certain types of modes of theater, I understand, or certain types of modes of art. This is also linked to a sense of, as I was suggesting or trying to suggest earlier, this is also linked to a sense of the idea of childlike, innocent play, role-playing, as one might do, playing with friends in the playground. And I think a lot is also made about, in the supplements, for example, about how the atmosphere created and generated within this film is one where Céline and Julie are almost like kids on an adventure, and they're friends that are playing, and they are getting into certain situations. And so this has that childlike, innocent quality, if you will, of play acting and playing games, and also the nature of curiosity and inquisitiveness. And that's, I think, generated in terms of the way that stories are intersecting with each other within the story arc of Céline and Julie themselves. But it's also other parts of the film, and in particular there is a separate story situation that we seem to be introduced to, and it seems to involve some kind of mysterious house and some kind of mystery, and it goes into somewhat dark or perhaps nuanced, sinister tones, dealing with the characters portrayed by Boulanger, Marie Van Spizier, and Barbet Schroeder, and their story arc. And one of the great mysteries, and one of the great playful mysteries of the film, is how the various stories intersect with each other. What are the connections between one and the other? And the film gives us little clues and hints, but it also gives us, the viewer, I think, the room to try to work out in our own ways, try to work out exactly what the various pieces of the puzzle are and how they are interlinked with each other. And I think that's also part of the fun. And in this dynamic, which is very rich, we get various strands of, say, the cinematic dynamic of Jacques Rivette, or the dynamism of Jacques Rivette's cinema. That's another way to put it. For example, we inherently get links to, further links to art, theater, and literature. For example, the links to Casares and Hardy, and also links to Lewis Carroll and fantasy, as well as gothic romance, as well as mystery. There's maybe slight touches of supernatural and horror. But these are all links to, say, some kind of basis in, say, literature allusion. as brought out in these situations, again, with Céline and Julie, and also the characters of Boulogier and Marie-France Bizier and Barbet Schroeder. So there are those links that are inherent. And also related to that is the idea of theater and what is artifice and what is the staged story versus what is quote-unquote real. So the reality versus the story. And from that thread we get ideas about the actual telling of tales. What is it about telling a story? What is it about the viewers watching a story or a play set on stage? What is it about Céline and Julie sitting down and, like audience members, looking out in fact into us, out to us, the camera, the viewers, as they are about to maybe engage with a story that is on a completely different plane in terms of time and place altogether. And this is, again, what is artifice, what is artificial, what is truth, what is fantasy. This is all inherent into the fundamental nature of storytelling and tales. And so, and it's also, I think, fundamental too, because it's not just the idea of the way that cinema is figured into that. It's a very important discussion. It's also the way that we as human beings engage with that on a almost intuitive level. And that is, I would suggest too, related to the notion of the childlike perspective on the world, the play acting, the innocent nature of curiosity and inquisitiveness. And that's also captured here, I would suggest, in the storytelling nature and the watching of stories and plays and play acting. That's all here in the childlike nature of, say, the atmosphere that's created in the context of the stories of Céline and Julie. It's a brilliant construction, and it's very complex, and it's also very playful at the same time. And the way that this film jumps from, say, position to position can also be said to be like jumping from time and place. So it's almost like a time travel type of film set in this very Jacques Rivette way, or in the hands of Jacques Rivette during the context of his role or his type of cinema in this 1970s French New Wave cinema. And so we get this very, I think, earnest portrayal of this type of thing. But in terms of the jumps in time and place, edits, but sudden clues emerge and sudden scenes come into fruition that make us realize that maybe there is something afoot. It's not just the idea of jumping from time to time and place to place, and it's not just the idea of hearing stories and telling stories. Maybe there's also the idea of total interaction and total immersion with the story itself, to the point that maybe things could be changed. And if that is the case, then the idea of play acting and Céline and Julie on an adventure, going off into some kind of unknown land which is filled with mystery, danger, and suspense. This is very much like a fairy tale. So it's all here. Fairy tale aspects, the gothic romance, touches of horror and the supernatural, ghost stories, as well as the idea of play acting, the idea of role reversal, the idea of the deep-rooted and fundamental sense of fun that is part of this playful nature. Again, it's a summertime movie in Paris, and yet it is about also the freedom that this type of feeling and atmosphere can engender. And part of that freedom is the use of the imagination. And it's not just the use of the imagination, but the power of the imagination to go so far as to perhaps change time and change events, hopefully for the better. And so it's all here in this wonderfully constructed and brilliantly joyful work that is Céline and Julie Go Boating. I should say also that the film could be said also to be about capturing a particular moment in time. One of the aspects of the film, I would suggest, is the use of time and imagination, or the depiction of such. And one way of looking at that is how the quote-unquote present day scenes in this film, having to do primarily with Céline and Julie, how this could also be said to be some kind of reflection of the moment. As I say, it's summertime in Paris in the 1970s, so we are getting we're getting quite significant aspects and shots of the city, Paris, and we are getting the lived-in experience of Céline and Julie, what they would be doing at the time, the type of places that they were going, the parks that they were visiting, the public transport that they were riding on. And so this captures the moment, the little historical details, if you will, of a particular moment in time in the past. And also inherent in that is certain aspects of culture or counterculture that are embedded into this. This is a film that is focusing in on Céline and Julie, and so they are given a sense or room to grow and breathe as individual characters. And so there is also in their discussions this type of freedom or liberty or liberté, and I think that is very important, not just in terms of their characters, but also perhaps broadly speaking on a cultural level and perhaps on a socio-political level as well. And related to that too is a reflection of the culture or counterculture aspects. A very key point of the plot is the candy or bonbon, and what this means, what its powers are, what it represents, if anything at all. It could be something very childlike or innocent. After all, it's like candy that people can eat. But also, if it's seen to have some kind of a powerful psychotropic effect, perhaps, then maybe it could be a metaphor or allusion to some kind of hallucinogenic, and that might be said also to be part of, say, the times or the culture or countercultural elements. And if that's the case, then this is also suggestive of how multi-leveled this film is. It's not just a film that is focusing in on, say, aspects of metaphor linking to the childlike, innocent curiosity natures, but it's also linking to, arguably speaking, a current historical links to cultural and social and perhaps even political discussions and aspects. And so I find that this is a film that is about the artificial nature of theater and storytelling, but it's also dealing in a very subtle way with the now, with the moment as it existed at the time. And so this is very, very key to this film. It's a multi-leveled masterpiece from Jacques Rivette, and it is called Céline and Julie Go Boating. So this is the Criterion Collection release. This is Spy number 1069, and this is the 2-disc Blu-ray of release of Céline and Julie Go Boating, and it's purported to be based on a 2K digital restoration, and it's a great presentation in my view. So I'm so glad it's here. And we have a second disc which essentially houses a lot of the supplements, a majority of the supplements here, and there are many, and is quite plentiful in that department. Some have been those that we might have seen in other past releases, non-Criterion releases, but others are new. So we are getting, I think, a nice, full, complete package when it comes to this Criterion release. So, for example, what we do get with this is, first of all, we get a brilliant commentary track, which was from 2017 from Adrian Martin. And I'm so glad that Criterion was able to include this as part of their own release, because it is, I think, very essential, very informative, and so much fun. Adrian Martin is an expert in this film. He also is obviously a fan of this film. He's seen it many times. He actually shares an anecdote about when he first saw it and how he was laughing a lot. And it reminds us how this film is a comedy. This is a very funny, joyful comedy about these characters, about these two women. And he reminds us of this very well and very convincingly. And he also talks about the career of Jacques Rivette up to Céline and Julie Go Boating, and his place in French cinema, and his concerns and his approach to filmmaking in, say, a work like Out One versus his approach to filmmaking in a work like Céline and Julie Go Boating. There are certain similarities, but there are also certain differences and points of differences. And I think one of those ways that the films, or one of the ways that I think this film and Jacques Rivette's filmmaking in this particular period is regarded is the way or the degree to which, say, improvisation is relied or not relied upon. And this film maybe might feel like it is one that is heavily improvisational, but in fact, I think Adrian Martin lends some really insightful comments as to the very nuanced way that, say, improvisation plays a role, if at all, in the context of the specifics of the production of Céline and Julie Go Boating. It's a fascinating dynamic and discussion, and it goes at the heart of, say, how Jacques Rivette works, and not just in his own cinema, but also how he works with other actors and the participants and that he does with this film. So it's very fascinating in that regard. And also, Adrian Martin talks about the various themes and concerns of the film in a very detailed way. He talks about Casares and Hardy and Lewis Carroll, and he also embeds that, or he interweaves that into a discussion of the use of literature, the role of various levels, fiction, artifice, and theater. He also talks about the countercultural points, the candy, and the way that the characters seem to be being portrayed, from a childlike vantage point on the one hand, but also we see them maybe playing out aspects of certain maybe culture or counterculture points of the time. And so there is a mix or blend of the childhood aspects and also the modern day aspects. And I think Adrian Martin makes the case very clearly and very convincingly. He also talks, among his other great points, about, for example, other points of cinema, other examples of film that could be said to be very similar to Céline and Julie Go Boating. He brings up the examples, for instance, of Ingmar Bergman's Persona, Vera Chytilova's film Daisies, and also David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. And I think these examples are very apt because they bring about, or they focus on, two female characters and their relationships with each other vis-a-vis themselves and also the externalities, and also a type of emotional, almost ethereal, but certainly very vivid way that the characters almost switch roles, or they tend to relate to each other to the point where maybe they are becoming very close indeed. Maybe there is a way that they are more related or more connected than one might realize. And so this is expressed in metaphorical terms and also emotional and cinematic terms in each of these various examples that Adrian Martin cites. And it's indeed true, I think, to a great degree in Céline and Julie Go Boating, in the characters of Céline and Julie. In that context, though, Adrian Martin does also point out certain contrast points. And I think in that contrast points discussion, it does it is emphasized that this film is also very much a film that is very joyful, very free-spirited. It's a focus on characters that seem to be in a state of liberation, and emotional and playful state of liberation. And that therefore their interaction is one of this type of feel or environment. And so this could be said to be a way that Céline and Julie Go Boating is relatable or comparable to those other works, but also maybe set apart to a certain degree from those other works, and so to a certain degree anyway. But there are also strong comparative links that I think Adrian Martin points out very, very convincingly. So for these and other reasons, the Adrian Martin commentary track is one to check out. I strongly recommend it, and I'm so glad that Criterion was able to include it as part of this Criterion release. So that's the first thing. The second thing is in the supplements themselves, we have a two-part documentary, or perhaps two-part discussion or intimate discussion with Jacques Rivette. And this is a work that is actually by Claire Denis. So it's a portrait, if you will, of Jacques Rivette in two parts. Jacques Rivette, Le Veilleur, and this is from 1994. And the two parts are first being Le Jour, and the second part being La Nuit. So the day and the night. Le Jour, the first part being about 1 hour, 12 minutes or so, and the second part, La Nuit, being approximately 56 minutes. And this is an intimate discussion, essentially, with Rivette. And in the first part, he is focusing, I think, on the aspect of cinema as a whole, the historical flow of cinema, the French New Wave, his place in that, and his, say, anecdotes with other people, other figures in the New Wave, and how he got into cinema, and his views and outtakes on various works. And then the second part is another free-flowing, almost a type of amorphous type of discussion, focusing in on Rivette's works specifically. And I think this is a really great documentary, two-part documentary, for a number of reasons. I think primarily for me, we get great insight, of course, from the filmmaker himself. And what I love, too, is how he's discussing his particular works. There's this way in which he speaks in this beautifully, and I mean this in a very positive way, a beautifully contradictory nature that Jacques Rivette speaks, for example, about Céline and Julie go boating, because it's a very multi-tiered film. It's a film that I think has many different aspects to it. It can be seen in many different lights through many different lenses and perspectives. And I think that hints at the fact that it can have a seemingly contradictory nature to it inherently in its structure. It could be said to be about the vantage point of children, but also adulthood, the innocent type of playfulness versus a sort of sinister feeling of horror and dread and mystery. There's a sense of the inquisitiveness. There's also a sense of the unknown. There's a sense of foreboding and fate versus the idea of liberation and freedom and choosing one's own fate, choosing one's own adventure, that sort of thing. And I think that type of inherent contradictory nature is beautiful. That's one of the great strengths of the film. And indeed, when we see Jacques Rivette in various interviews, such as here, talk about his works like Céline and Julie go boating, he seems to have that way of being able to talk about various dynamics of the film almost instantaneously. And so I think there is a lovely way how that inherent aspect of the film comes through so shiningly when Jacques Rivette speaks. And so I'm so grateful for this inclusion of these discussions, including this Claire Denis work on Jacques Rivette, this documentary, Le Veilleur, as I say, from 1994. But to continue on, we have a new discussion, a Zoom call discussion between two critics and experts in French cinema, and also Jacques Rivette and this film. So Pacôme Thielmont and Hélène Frappat. And this is approximately 34 minutes, and this is a great discussion on Jacques Rivette and also on Céline and Julie go boating, the connections to literature, further connections made to, say, Henry James and Robert Louis Stevenson, and also the ghost story aspects of the film, the gothic romance aspects of the film, as well as the way to view the essence or the depiction of liberté in this film, thus focusing in on the actual meaning and interpretation of the characters themselves, Céline and Julie. And this is a very lively discussion. It tends to be, not always, but it sometimes turns into a little bit of a friendly debate as well. And so I really appreciate this. And they both have a very strong and passionate take on this film, Céline and Julie go boating. So this is a fascinating discussion between these two scholars and experts and lovers of this film. So Pacôme Thielmont and Hélène Frappat, the discussion between the two of them, approximately 34 minutes. That's not all, because we also get a new discussion, again described as being from 2020, a one-on-one interview with Bull Augier. And as we know, she is one of the people that features in this film Céline and Julie Goboting. She plays a very key role. And so she talks here a little bit about her working relationship with Jacques Rivette leading up to Céline and Julie Goboting. There were a number of other works, of course, that she appeared in. And she talks about the working relationship with him, and also with the other actors that she was working with, in particular Marie-France Pizier. And so she is, her comments here are just wonderful and brilliant, because it gives us yet further insight into the almost intimate nature, if you will, of how Jacques Rivette approached the cinema. Also how Boule Augier approached her particular component of the film, because, as I say, this is a multi-component type of work, and so she has her part and there are other parts, and so how she focused in, how she tried to approach the film on those terms. A great interview. Again, approximately 10 minutes. And then we have another one-on-one interview, this time also from 2020, this time with Barbet Schroeder, 12 minutes. So he is a figure of many roles in this film. He is a producer, and also he is an actor in this film, and he plays a very key role in the maybe in another aspect of this film, let me put it that way. And so he talks a little bit about his role in terms of his working relationship, how he got into, ended up in this position, and his career prior to working with Rivette. Here he mentions, of course, Eric Romer, and also he mentions later with Rivette Out One, and then Céline and Julie Goboting. Barbet Schroeder has, I think, his role in this film is quite significant, of course. He's, in terms of his performance and the character that he plays, and he also gives a little bit of insight, and it's also revealed elsewhere, about what his concerns were as a producer. There are some discussions here and elsewhere about maybe there might have been concern early on about the overall running time of this film, but then ultimately it was realized that by Barbet Schroeder and others that, in fact, the running time is perfect, and that if one tried to take out certain subplots, then the whole thing would fall apart, like a house of cards that would fall if one card is removed. And so that decision and those sorts of details come out here and elsewhere. And so Barbet Schroeder is and he's, again, his experience and knowledge is anytime we are able to, or I'm able to listen to that interview with him, it's a wonderful opportunity for me. So here's another great example of that. Again, approximately 12 minutes. And then we have some what might be deemed other, maybe not necessarily archival footage or archival supplements, but other supplements from other sources. And so the first being Couleurs du Festival de Cannes, described as being from 1974, and this is maybe a discussion or interview, approximately 6 minutes, with Marie-France Pizier and Juliette Berthaud and Boule Augier. And they talk in this interview format about working on the set, what it was like working in this type of film and its construction. And they talked about how it was almost divided into teams because of the nature of the story itself. And it was great because there's a comment made how they were so free, they had this sense of freedom, so they could play each other's roles. And I found that to be such a profound statement, because it goes at the very heart, or one of the essences, if you will, of the film, which is role reversal and the magic of that, and the ethereal, metaphorical nature of that, also the playful nature of that, and also the liberating aspect as an actor, as a performer, how liberating that must feel. So this is great to have. Approximately 6 minutes. And then to continue on, we have an episode of Pour le Cinéma, also described as being from 1974, 11 minutes. And this is includes Jacques Rivette, as well as Juliette Berthaud, Boule Augier, and Marie-France Pizier. And also Dominique Labourier is featured as well. There are some clips included. The nature of the presentation of the clips and the discussion with the cast and crew, as it were, as well as Dominique Labourier in a sort of edited together. So I love this too because it's described as being a type of the elements are described. The season is very emphasized, and it's a type of a summer vacation sort of movie. I think one of the phrases is used there. And so I love this group dynamic because you can see that there's a natural rapport between and among the people. And this is reflected very well in the film, and it feels very much like a day-to-day thing. And I think that makes it even more extraordinary because we realize that this day-to-day aspect, this natural rapport is captured, this natural chemistry is captured in the film, and yet it's again, that's another part of the seemingly contradictory nature of the film. It seems to be day-to-day and very much ordinary, and yet it's talking about these extraordinary things of art, literature, and fantasy and magic. And so I love this dynamic multi-structured parallelism that is occurring even when you watch the Pour le Cinéma, group conversations here. Brilliant stuff. Approximately 11 minutes. And then we have another discussion with Jacques Rivette. It's called Histoire de titres, or the story of titles. This is described as being from 1974, but actually I'm not sure if that's the case because in this conversation Jacques Rivette is actually speaking about the story behind the titles of his particular films. And when you hear his discussion, you realize that he's talking about films that he made not just in 1974, Céline and Julie Go Boating, but also films he made after that, leading up into, in fact, the 1980s. And so perhaps this is not a 1974, the date is not 1974, maybe it's in the 1980s, I think. But in any event, Jacques Rivette, Histoire de titres, is one where it's him talking. It's approximately 8 minutes, and he's giving us some details as to the reasons why he chose the titles for his particular films. And so including Céline and Julie Go Boating. So another fascinating aspect into the creative mind, if you will, of Jacques Rivette. And I love too the detail about Céline and Julie Go Boating. There's it's of course including the two names, and he's talking about the importance of these names, and also he's talking about how it's very reminiscent of a type of serial or comic book type of title, Céline and Julie Go Boating. And that's very important too because it leads us into how this film is related to, say, the comic book or the serial. Louis Feuillade is also a filmmaker that was mentioned, say, in the Adrian Martin commentary. And so this is a very important, say, point of connectivity, if you will, how this feels like a serial. The structure of the film Céline and Julie Go Boating almost feels like an episodic thing within the film itself. And so you have little mini episodes, and they are connected in this serialized fashion sort of way. That's another way of looking at it. And I think that's reflected almost inherently in the title. And that is hinted at, or not hinted at, that's directly referenced, in fact, by Rivette as he's speaking. For example, about the reasoning behind this particular title, Céline and Julie Go Boating. So fascinating, absolutely fascinating stuff. And then we have some supplements borrowed from other past releases, I understand, so or from other sources. So we have a 2004 interview with Jacques Rivette, approximately 20 minutes. And so here he is looking back on Céline and Julie Go Boating and some of the circumstances behind the film, how it was created in the first place. There were some other plans for some other film before that didn't pan out eventually, and there were some other actors that he was planning to work with, but that didn't end up being the case. And so due to certain circumstances like that, which he touches upon in this interview and elsewhere, we got his film here, Céline and Julie Go Boating, where he was able to work with Juliette Berthaud and then Dominique Labourier. And so that is the circumstances for that, as well as his further comments on the approach and style and aesthetic of the film. Again, whenever we have the opportunity to hear from Jacques Rivette himself about this and other films, it's well worth checking out. So please do if you can. This is approximately 20 minutes. And then we have a series of interviews. It's all edited together, and it's divided into 3 subcomponents, totaling 35 minutes. The first is with Bulle Augier, the second with Dominique Labourier, and the third with Marie-France Pizier. And these are all, I understand, from 2004, again, totaling 35 minutes. So the first component is with Bulle Augier. And this is great because she is talking here about her working relationship with Jacques Rivette, also her working relationship with Marie-France Pizier, and how she saw herself versus how she saw the working method of Marie-France Pizier. It's a very fascinating dynamic, and it's very respectfully described too. Also, she's talking about some of the themes and some of the metaphors of the film, the candy, the bonbon, and the link to, say, hallucinogenics, and also the nature of her character. She mentions the idea of coquetry or flirtatiousness, perhaps, and how that is a very important component of the Gothic romance storyline that her component was very much attuned to. So that's the interview with Bulle Augier. And then the component interview with Dominique Labourier is wonderful because I love her presentation style. There is a way in which, as she's being interviewed, it's almost like she's telling the story. And there's a liveliness to Labourier, and it may be reflective of her personality, but here she's talking about the sense of maybe the magic and the randomness and the type of freedom that is experienced there. And so Dominique Labourier, of course, is, and that's very much part of the role that she played in her own component of the film. And her working relationship with Juliette Berthaud, and the kind of chemistry that was generated from that, and the friendship that was reflected in that. So this is another great component. And then the third component is the interview with Marie-France Pizier. And as we know, she is in the part of the film together with Bulle Augier and Barbet Schroeder, and that story arc. And here she's talking about working with Rivette, the sense of freedom or liberté that was there. There is this sense of organization, but also the idea that the performers were allowed a sense of free will and a chance to explore. I think that's very important too, because especially for the story arc involving Marie-France Pizier's character, there is a type of hinting at of a backstory or history of the characters that we don't necessarily see directly on camera, but we have to get a sense of it, we have to get a feeling, or we have to have an intuition of what their backstories might be in order to become further involved. I think that type of exploration is referenced to by Marie-France Pizier in her comments here and others. So, a great set of interviews here, again from 2004, Bulle Augier and Dominique Labourier and Marie-France Pizier. And then we have the booklet, and the booklet, as you can see, is a stapled booklet, and I love that because it's very robust, and it's carrying through, or it's consistent with the art design of the particular cover art and Criterion release. So that's great. It has this watercolor type of painting aspect to it, and I think that's quite. It's colorful, and it's bright, and it's vivid. Art directors Eric Skillman, Sarah Habibi, illustration Lauren Tamaki, and designer Eric Skillman. So again, a wonderful representation and capturing and encapsulation of the spirit of the film, or the spirits of the film themselves. We'll put it in the plural. And then talking about the booklet itself, we have the two writings that are included. The first is an essay by Beatrice Loayza, and it's called State of Play. And I love this because the essay goes into, of course, the significance of the film, thematic treatments, story arc considerations, Rivette's career leading up to Céline and Julie go boating, and also various aspects of other comparisons. Dorothy Arzner comparison comes to mind. And so I like this further exploration and the context or discussion of this in the context of the tapestry of cinema as a whole, and also the specific treatment of the themes and the playful nature of Rivette's camera and his cinema writ large, and also the contributions of the performers such as Berthaud and Le Bourrier. So the essays are one of the strengths of the Criterion releases, and this is another great example of that. So this is the essay which is called State of Play. And then we have a wonderful writing which is called Last Summer in Paris, and this is by Juliette Berthaud. And Juliette Berthaud is, as you know, one of the performers, one of the actors in the film. And we get a little bit of Juliette Berthaud's own comments in some of the supplements, but she passed away very early in her life, too soon, and so we don't get any contemporary, interview with her, unfortunately. And so any perspective that we can get from Juliette Berthaud is always welcome. From any performer, of course, is always welcome. But also included in that is, of course, Juliette Berthaud. And so, in addition to, say, the comments that we get from her in some of the supplements in this Criterion release, we also get the writing here. And this is described as being a piece that was written for Céline and Julie Go Boating's press kit in 1974, and then it's translated into English. And this is a very detailed perspective from Juliette Berthaud herself about the circumstances, specific anecdotes of the production, and also working with Jacques Rivette himself, and how Jacques Rivette, what she learned in terms of cinema and the art of cinema, because she's not just, right, she is a filmmaker and an artist and an actor. And so she is talking a little bit about the influence of Jacques Rivette and the influence of him versus the influence of other filmmakers that Juliette Berthaud had worked with along the way in her very, very illustrative and incredibly impressive career. And so this is invaluable. So in other words, we get the perspective of, say, many of the performers in the film from various interviews, such as Marie-France Bizier and Boulanger and Dominique Labourier. And then we can see this essay as being the perspective from Juliette Berthaud on a detailed level about working with Rivette, and also how about her perspective on cinema and about anecdotes of the film and the little details that shine through. And this is therefore brilliant. And so please, if you can, please check out and read this writing by Juliette Berthaud. It serves as her own sort of one-on-one interview, as it were. And so it forms a nice companion piece to that, say, three-part interview that I was mentioning earlier from 2004 from each of the participants there. So if you watch that and then read this writing by Juliette Berthaud, then you'll get essentially all of the four main female actors in this film, plus the Barbet Schroeder interview from 2020, which was included elsewhere in the Criterion disc. So watching those and then reading this, I think you'll get a great perspective. So that's to say that this writing here, the inclusion of it, is fantastic. So please read it if you can. It is by Juliette Berthaud herself, and it is in English, translated into English, which is called Last Summer in Paris. And so with that, my friends, this is Céline and Julie Go Boating, a wonderful addition to the Criterion Collection physical media catalog. It is funny, it's a comedy, it is magical, it is an imaginative example of the magic of cinema in the hands of Jacques Rivette and the hands of these great performers and actors, Juliette Berthaud, Dominique Labourier, Marie-France Bizier, Boulanger, Barbet Schroeder. And what magic they can do together to create something that is so vivid, so full of life, so full of happiness and joy, the feelings and memories of summer, the notions and conceptions of Paris in a certain period of time or times. It is timeless in the sense that we are dealing with multiple time frames, time jumping, fact and fiction, storytelling, theater, investigation, mystery, murder mysteries, maybe science fiction, and horror, gothic romance, and also the relationship between characters, the intimate nature, the playful nature between these particular protagonists, our heroes of the film, as it were. And we follow them, we follow their actions, we follow their dialogues, we follow their stories, and there are many stories to tell in this multi-fashioned, multifaceted, multi-tiered, and highly inventive, highly structured, and wonderfully energetic and beautifully portrayed film. It is, in many ways, the ultimate summer movie indeed. What a film this is. This is Jacques Rivette's film, Céline and Julie Go Boating. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.